Well, Benedicite Dominus, and welcome to question 149 of the Secunda Secundae. The topic for this lecture is sobriety, and I am Dr. Thibault. So we are looking at the cardinal virtue of temperance here, and the subjective parts. One of the subjective parts is sobriety. So temperance is kind of that umbrella, like the animal kingdom. The different parts are like the lion or the ox or some other animal, right? So sobriety is one of the animals within the kingdom of temperance. So when we look at sobriety, we're looking at it primarily through the lens of drinking. um, there is a metaphorical sense of being sober and alert, but primarily what we're talking about under temperance is drinking alcohol. So Sirach, the book of Sirach, says a lot about this, and Proverbs a bit too, because they're practical wisdom books. So Sirach says, if thou drink it moderately, thou shalt be sober. So sobriety isn't about not drinking at all. If anyone's watching this because they're thinking about doing AA, this is not advice for people in AA. This is the wisdom of the Summa Theologica, and we're talking about these virtues, so it is different. So I'm not telling people who are alcoholics to drink moderately and therefore they're sober. So just as a warning. Um, so this is for people who don't have alcohol problems. If you're not an alcoholic, sobriety would be about drinking, but about drinking in moderation. If you drink in moderation, you are still sober. Sobriety takes its name from bria, right? And sobriety has bria as its core. It means the proper measure of things. So drinking in the right way, right? In the right order. This is, again, goes back to abstinence and fasting. Doing things in the proper order is the right way of doing it. Now, if you do it immoderately, then it's in excess. And if you do something in excess, it causes harm. The book of Sirach says if you drink in excess, it will lead to quarreling and wrath and many ruins. Now, this does relate back to people perhaps in AA. Maybe this calls out to people from their who aren't in AA, but maybe in their youth they drank more. Right? If you see people who are drinking, you'll end up seeing fights and quarrels and drunk driving accidents and bad decision making. Not because a person had a glass of wine, but because they drank 2 bottles of wine, right? The excess that creates the problem. Now, is sobriety a special virtue? Yes. So whenever there's a special hindrance to reason or virtue, you can have a special virtue to overcome it. So what is the special hindrance that sobriety is overcoming? Intoxication, right? Special issue dealing with alcohol. Now, St. Thomas points out, we're not going to have a special virtue for every type of food. We're not going to have a special virtue for a person's addiction to strawberries or chocolate. We're also not going to have one special virtue for rum and another one for gin and another one for beer. For food, we deal with abstinence, and for alcohol, we'll deal with sobriety. So we'll look at it in a somewhat narrow but also somewhat broad sense. Things that intoxicate include all of it. This would also then probably today include things like marijuana and things like that as well, because we're dealing with intoxicating substances. There is more intoxicating substances than just alcohol. So if alcohol can be intoxicating, shouldn't we just make it outlawed entirely? But again, recall back to what sobriety is about. It's drinking things in the proper measure, in the proper amount, in moderation. So St. Thomas is not saying no, because alcohol can have negative effects, no alcohol, no, in moderation. And some of the scriptures he points out uh, are like First Timothy, do not drink water, but use a little wine for thy stomach's sake, or for frequent infirmities. We now have perhaps better medicines, but in the old days, if somebody was sick, give them a little bit of wine in the water. You know, why did people drink so much beer before? Because the water was kind of somewhat toxic, polluted. So you make beer out of it, and it's healthier to drink. Um, uh, Spelling mistake in the second one. But wine drunken with moderation is the joy of the soul and the heart. Another line from Sirach. Celebrate with some wine. That's good. Why condemn that if it's done in moderation? Uh, do not that which goeth in the mouth that defileth a man. Right? That's coming from the words of Jesus himself. It's not what goes into the body, but it's what comes out of the body. If our wine isn't going to defile the body in a spiritual way, it's just wine. um, Now, why should you not drink? Right? There's reasons to drink. St. Thomas points out there's the circumstance of the drinker and there's the mode of drinking, which can create a problem. So if a person when they drink, their health gets immediately worse, well then don't do it, right? If it makes you worse off, don't do it. Secondly, because of a vow, there might be religious communities, people stay off of alcohol because it's seen as a bit of a luxury, or for a spiritual reason, people might give up alcohol for Lent. That's a good thing because one has vowed it. So then that's the reason not to. The second is the mode of drinking. So if a person exceeds the measure of drinking, the proper measure of drinking, then you shouldn't, right? If every time you drink to excess, then maybe don't drink, right? If you can't do it with moderation and in a healthy way, don't do it at all. Next is on account of scandalizing others. I point to St. Paul for this. If drinking scandalizes other people, don't do it. And this would be perhaps a good one connected with people in AA. If you're around people who have a drinking problem, it would be best and not to drink in front of them. Right? It would be best not to create a temptation for people who have problems with it. If you're going out to dinner with a friend who's in recovery, it doesn't hurt to order a Coca-Cola that night instead of a gin and tonic or whatever you drink. If this is a longtime friend and they don't have, they've overcome this for years and they're okay with you drinking, that's different. It doesn't scandalize them. But if it has the potential to scandalize them, then just go without, right? If your desire for alcohol is more important than the good of your friend, then that's a problem, right? Then you do have a drinking problem. Lastly, should sobriety be required for some? And St. Thomas points out this for two reasons. One is those who are prone to concupiscence. The first one he says is youth. So the heat of youth, which we have laws about this. Right? We don't let teenagers drink in the United States because of the heat of youth. They don't have the experience. They don't have the wherewithal. They think they're immortal. They'll do it to excess, probably. So this is the heat of youth. So they should refrain from that pleasure because they're not good at doing it in moderation. Secondly, St. Thomas points out women. And this is coming from ancient Roman practices, where in ancient Rome, women weren't allowed to drink. And he says it's they don't have a sufficient strength of mind. They don't have a strong enough mind to handle it. That would be a bit controversial today that women don't have the proper strength of mind to handle alcohol. He's taking this from ancient Rome. Um, what you could say perhaps today is that for some reason, I think science has pointed this out that women have a lesser ability to metabolize alcohol than men. You know, that's smaller frame, less muscle, whatever other chemistry there is between men and women. Women have a lesser ability to handle as much alcohol. So if a woman and a man were to both drink the same amount of alcohol, a woman would get drunk faster. You know, the unfairness of nature. Right? This really isn't sufficient strength of mind, but there is a biological difference between men and women. So you would point that out. You know, today we probably would not want a law that says men can drink and women can't. Um, but it would, if you want to take the principle from it would be some people are not as physically able to handle alcohol as other people, and those who are less capable of handling it should probably drink less. You know, I know for myself, I would be lightweight. I should not drink more than one alcoholic drink, uh, whereas other people could, right? So you just have to know your biology and know yourself. And the second is those who should not drink because of a special operation that they hold. So St. Thomas says the elderly are the examples for the young. They are the role models for the young. Therefore, they should be sober. They should show extreme sobriety in order to be a good example. You can see this perhaps at a party where if all the adults are drinking a lot, it creates a bad role model for the youth. Sometimes the elderly drinking too much is uh, a negative role model. Right? You see what you don't want to become. But he says, elderly should set an example of sobriety. He also points out that bishops and ministers should also show extreme sobriety because they must always be ready for their ministerial role. They have a duty to perform within society, and they can't show up to these things drunk. They're a role model, just like the elderly are role model. They are also role models. I know when I went through formation, the thing that I was told somewhat tongue in cheek is you should always have a drink and it should always be full. You don't, as a clergy person, you don't want to come off as uh, prudish. Right? You don't want to make other people uncomfortable if other people are drinking in moderation. Acting perfectly appropriate with alcohol. You don't want to be prudish around them, but at the same time, you must be to the highest level of sobriety. Therefore, hold the drink so that it appears that you're not prudish, but don't drink it in order to remain sober. That was the example we had. I think that was probably a pre-Vatican II rule or a piece of advice. And lastly, kings. Kings would perhaps be today anyone in important political power, because they have to make good decisions. And if they are not sober, they might not make good decisions. And they should have the practice of always being sober, and so that they are always in a position to make good decisions. So, in conclusion, alcohol is really the subject matter of sobriety. Sobriety is a special virtue because intoxication is a special vice. Um, Wine should be lawful. Alcohol should be lawful according to St. Thomas because done with moderation, it's perfectly fine. The problem is when it's done in excess. And sobriety has special requisites, right? You have to take into consider youth and your own biology. And if you have a particular role within society, either as a clergy person or a role model or somebody in political power who has to make good decisions, you should be thinking about not only your own pleasure, but the good of the commonwealth. So this all matters. So next we will get into drunkenness. Sticking with this alcohol theme for these two questions, 149 and 150.